Hello, we are Group 8 and our names are Lucas Martins, André Cunha and Tomás Bicha. In this video, we are going to explain how the Java exceptions, null pointer exception, index out of bounds exception, and IO exception occur, and how to avoid and fix them. When executing a code, it is possible that various errors occur, and when this happens, the compiler will stop and present an error message, which technically speaking is called throwing an exception. Let's start with the null pointer exception. Null pointer exception is a runtime exception. In Java, a null value can be assigned to an object reference. The null value is used to indicate that no value is assigned to a reference variable. The null pointer exception occurs when a program attempts to use an object reference that has the null value. This exception can occur in various scenarios, like taking the length of null as if it were an array, as we see in the example. Other situations where the null pointer exception can happen might be when accessing or modifying a null object's field or when invoking a method for a null object. To avoid the null pointer exception, we must make sure that all the objects are initialized properly before we use them. When we declare a variable, we must guarantee that the object is not null before we request a method or a field from the objects. To fix this exception, just check what method or variable accidentally had the null value assigned to it and correct it.
Index out of bounds exception. This situation happens when a user or a developer wants to access an index of an array that doesn't exist. This usually occurs due to confusion caused by the concept of zero index. For example, if you have an array with a length of 4 positions, the indexes will be 0, 1, 2, and 3. So, it will not be possible to access index 4, as the fourth position is index 3. Let's look at this practical example. If I ask the computer what's the array's length, it will tell me that it is equal to 4. But if I run a loop where the index is smaller or equal to the array's length, in this case it is 4, it will give me an error, as index 4 doesn't exist. Although, if the loop's index is smaller or equal to the array's length minus 1, in this case it is 3, the code will work correctly. Let's look at another practical example. But first, let's get familiar with the try and catch statements. The try statement allows you to define a block of code and look for potential errors while it is being executed. The catch statement allows you to define a block of code to be executed if any error is found in the try block. So now, when we execute the code when index is 3, everything is fine, as the number in index 3 of the array is 40. But if we execute the code when index is 4, the error message will appear because index 4 doesn't exist.
Now I'm going to explain what's an IO exception and how to solve it. An IO exception is an input-output exception. It has to do with an error related to the input of the user. So, in the following example, we are asking the user to insert a file of the computer. If the user writes a file that doesn't exist in the computer, it would give us an IO exception. More specifically, a file not found exception, because the error is related to the input of the user. And so, the solution would be to use a try and catch. Basically now, with a try and catch, the error would be grabbed and the program would just keep running. In the example, the catch grabs the error and says, "File is not existent, say another one." And it would go to the top of the main method again until the user writes a valid file. Once the file was confirmed, the try and catch would not be used and the program would just keep running.